Welcome to day 4 of our Best Garden Year Ever challenge. So today we're going to be walking through how you know when to put your plants in so that you don't miss any of the windows and you're able to grow everything that you want to. And we're also going to be discussing seed starting, direct sowing, kind of all of the different options and when you know you need to pick one versus the other for getting your plants in the ground. Now, if you missed any of the other days or you didn't get any of the free worksheets and charts that are going to help you do all of this, make sure that you snag them. You can sign up for the emails and all of the free worksheets and charts at melissaknorris.com/mybestgarden. And I'll have the links below the video so that you can go back and catch videos days 1, 2, and 3. Now, I have to say, of all the ways to grow and get your plants going, direct sowing is the easiest and the most ideal. And all that means is you are taking a seed, you're putting it directly into the ground where it's going to grow for the whole time. It sprouts and it grows and it produces for you, and you don't have to ever do any transplanting or any babying. So that's ideal. But for a lot of the country, many of us, in order to be able to grow the foods that we want, have to do some type of seed starting indoors, especially on things like tomatoes and peppers. Now, if you live in a southern climate, then you probably don't have to do this. And if you've got one of those from our homework from day 2 and you've got a long growing period of your warm weather plants, you might not need to do this. But if you're like me and many people in northern climates, or even really kind of like the Midwest, then probably with your tomatoes and peppers, you're going to need to seed start them indoors. Now, obviously, you could purchase starts and small plants from a nursery or from the store, but if you're going to have your best garden year ever, you're going to want to do seed starting so that you can get the varieties that are best suited for your preserving and that your family likes, as well as saving money by starting it with your seed starting. A packet of seeds is much cheaper than purchasing them from the store. And like I said, the variety that I grow, I have only seen once. In the 20 plus years that I have been gardening, I've only seen that variety for sale once in the store, the San Marzano Lungo, to even be able to purchase that start where I live. So when it comes to seed starting, you actually have a couple of options. Now, one, you have to absolutely know what your last average frost date is. That was part of our assignment from day number 2, because that is going to determine, you're going to be counting backwards for these crops, how many weeks before that date you need to be starting them indoors so they're at the right size and you're able to get them planted outdoors at the appropriate time when it is warm enough in your area, so that you don't want them to be too large. So if you start them way too early, then they're going to be too big and they're going to become root bound and outgrowing, and you're going to run into issues that way. But if you wait and you don't get them started soon enough and you wait too long, then they might not be large enough. They won't be mature enough to actually produce a harvest for you before that first frost comes in the fall. So that's why we've got these dates and everything outlined if you're going to be seed starting that you really need to know. You also need to know when to direct sow these different plants outside. Your warm weather crops are typically anywhere 2 to 4 weeks after your last average frost date, but some of these, your cooler weather crops like radishes and onions and kale, some of those can be actually put in before you have your last frost date. So of course, in the book, The Family Garden Plan, I have a very detailed chart that lays all of this out for you and that goes into depth with seed starting, direct sowing, and we're going to be talking about as well winter sowing. So when it comes to your seed starting, you are probably used to seeing where people will have the small little cartons of soil and you'll put your seeds in there and you start them indoors, which is what I do for my tomatoes and my peppers. And I also use a grow light. So most northern climates do not have, when we're starting, which is still in the winter or very early spring, we're not getting enough strong sunlight, even in the most southern exposure window, in order for our starts to have enough light to grow healthy and be very vigorous. So if you've ever had seed starts that were really leggy, really long and weak, or they were stretching towards a window, that meant that you had insufficient light and you really need to get a grow light to have really strong plants so that you have your best garden ever. Good news is, if you're signed up for the emails and the worksheets, I will send you some resources on the grow light that I use, and you can do it in just a small area, just in the corner of my living room with one grow light. It's the same grow light. I've had it for going on, oh goodness, 7 or 8 years now. Same light bulb too. I'm able to start all 18 to 20 of my tomato plants as well as all of my pepper plants in just a small corner. Now, the other option that you have is to do winter sowing. So winter sowing has worked really great for me on cool weather crops. I did try it with my tomatoes and my peppers, and a lot of gardeners, even in very cold climates, say that they have success doing winter sowing with their tomatoes and peppers. But my own personal experience did not work out that way. So I still use a grow light and do indoors for my tomatoes and peppers. But winter sowing is when you take a container, you can use a milk jug, you can use like a clamshell plastic container that has that hinge where it will open and close. You put your soil in the container and you put your seeds in there. And then you close it up and you actually put it outdoors. So sometimes people just actually put it like out in the snow, outside. And because it's in that plastic, it will heat up in there and it creates like a little mini greenhouse. The seeds will sit dormant if it's too cold, but once it begins to get warm enough, then they will begin to sprout and grow inside this plastic container without the aid of using a grow light, electricity, or heat or anything like that. Now, when I first did it, I put it out in like January, and some of the seeds didn't begin to sprout until the end of February, the beginning of March. So it's going to vary on every year on when the temperatures are right for those seeds to be able to germinate. And like I said, I had great success with cooler weather crops. I did some cabbage and broccoli and kale and those types of things and lettuce. But with my tomatoes and peppers, eventually they did sprout, but they didn't begin to sprout and grow in those containers until it was about mid-May. And so I had little tiny tomato sprouts mid-May, whereas the tomatoes that I had started in the house were like this big and ready to be put out and were just a week or two away from beginning to form their first blossoms. And because I have that early frost date in the fall, if I had just done the winter sowing with the tomatoes and peppers, they wouldn't have been large enough. They would have just been starting to hit production time when my frost came in, which would have greatly reduced the amount of harvest, obviously, I would get off of them. So it's well worth testing out, but my personal experience, it didn't work very well for those warm weather crops. So for winter sowing, cool weather crops all the way. It's very easy. It's a great way to go, but I don't use it for my warm weather crops. I still use my traditional seed starting indoors. So armed with your information on your first and last average frost date, and you've already determined how many plants you need of each of those to take your family through a full year, as well as which varieties are going to be best suited to your area. Now you're going to go through the charts of the plants that you decided to grow, and you're going to plop down the dates, which have been a column provided for you, on when you're going to be sowing them, either seed starting them indoors and or direct sowing outdoors. And it's got all of the information there for you. So it tells you how many days it typically takes those seeds to germinate, when to start them indoors if you're going to be starting them, and then when you plant those transplants outdoors, as well as the direct sow information. So you know if you're just taking the seed and planting it outside, when that needs to happen as well. And not only do we have your spring planting times for your spring and summer crops, but also information on if they're a candidate for fall and winter gardens, when you'll want to do it for that timeline as well. So you're going to want to make sure that you tune in tomorrow for video number 5, where we're going to be talking about picking the best place and ways on your property where you're going to be growing in your yard these different crops, and some great options that can help you grow more in the same amount of space, and also take advantage of microclimates and zones and or easy season extenders, so that you can kind of cheat and get some of these crops and plants growing even earlier, or extending them into the winter months. So make sure that you go and get all of these charts and these worksheets and the resources that are totally for free at melissaknorris.com/mybestgarden. And I will meet you back here tomorrow for day number 5.